A little girl named Alicia was playing with butterflies in a field when her father, who was out plowing a plot of land, called her to come home. At home, her father was carving an owl out of wood with a knife, while Alicia asked why everything on the map around Edthia was completely black. Truthfully, he didn't really know either, but he explained that the world goes on beyond the continent of Edthia. However, in those dark areas, terrible black beasts reside. Among those beasts, the 4 great kings stand guard over the 4 cardinal points, and every expedition or research team that's ever been sent has been wiped out. These 4 kings have always stopped humanity from venturing beyond Edthia's borders, and Alicia's father believes the world must be far bigger than they know. Maybe people will always be confined to Edthia unless the old legend comes true, that among all heroes, a chosen few, wielding weapons given by the King of Hyden, will defeat the 4 kings of the Black Beasts. Still, it won't be easy. These evil kings are powerful enough to split the sky and the earth, which is why those special weapons from Hyden are needed. They can multiply the strength of whoever uses them many times over. Alicia became fascinated by these weapons, so her father patted her on the head and said that to wield one, she'd first have to be recognized as one of those heroes. Hearing this, the little girl promised to become a hero, so she could explore the entire world. Years later, in the next scene, a carriage bounces along a road at night, jostled by a rock in its path. The noise wakes a weary warrior, who looks over at her companions inside the vehicle. Holding the owl pendant her father had made, Alicia quietly tells him that the time has come. Even if he can't be there with her, it's finally time to chase the answer to her dream. As they travel, a warrior named Katz, whose regalia is the Scythe of Water, remarks that seeing so many regalias gathered in one place is breathtaking. Beside him, Horgus, a burly man who wields the muscular plow regalia, points out that these are the legendary weapons, granted only to those proven worthy to be called heroes. Merlo, who possesses the bottomless well regalia, tells the guys to keep it down, warning that these regalias could easily destroy a carriage like this. Mudo, with his great bull's horn regalia, thinks it'd be dumb to wreck their ride home. Katz finds it interesting how everyone comes from a different corner of the world. Horgus from Thorn, Merlo from Hyden. Then there's Minarch, whose Eldorado regalia and mixed bloodlines mean he doesn't even know where he's from. Finally, the men express some curiosity about Alicia's name, but before she can answer, Stefan, who wields the Pegasus regalia, interrupts to warn that they're now deep in beast territory, which means an attack could come at any moment. Horgus quietly asks his neighbor why this guy is acting like the leader, but Mudo thinks they should let it slide. Stefan really is the most skilled among them. Suddenly, one of the carriage horses whinnies, and the carriage stops. All the warriors fall silent, until the driver calls out that the road ahead is impassable by carriage. Before anyone can react, black beasts attack the man outside and the horses, and the warriors jump out to face their enemies. Stefan orders the archer to clear a path and the lancer to advance, while he and Alicia Glenfall, with her stone swallow regalia, will take care of the rest of the beasts. The plan is to reach the summit without losing anyone. The archers pick off the beasts at the front, clearing a path for the rest of the soldiers, who rush into a cave up ahead. From the top of the mountain, a monster ponders that if the world emerged from chaos, so must he have been born from it. Inside the cave, the warriors dispatch their foes. Katz spins like a tornado, showing impressive skill by taking down several enemies at once. Not to be outdone, Stefan gathers a ball of energy so powerful it vaporizes countless monsters deep within the cave. Mudo and Merlo run into a 3-headed serpent, but Stefan steps in and, with his cutting wave technique, slices all 3 heads clean off. One head still clings to life for a few seconds, but Alicia finishes the job by driving her sword through its eye. After clearing the cave, the group steps outside and Stefan asks if they've reached the fortress of the King of the Black Beasts. He insists that they're so close to becoming legends they'll soon be the first true heroes. But then, the ground starts to shake, and Alicia suspects the Lord of the Moonlit Mountain is drawing near. Sure enough, atop the highest peak of the fortress, a monster unleashes a sinister surge of electricity that tears through the front lines, heralding the arrival of Clevitus of the Moonlight, one of the 4 kings of the Black Beasts, ruler of Edthia's far south. Despite the creature's terrifying aura, Stefan reminds everyone that they are the 13 heroes chosen by the King of Hyden. Swearing by the crimson steel of the apex and his own pride, Stefan vows to defeat this enemy. With that, the leader charges forward, dragging the other warriors with him. But Stefan is ripped apart in an instant by a tail strike too fast for any human eye to follow. Enraged, Horgus tells the others to get behind him. The giant lunges with his crushing wave attack, but is beheaded just as easily by Clevitus. 2 more heroes fall to the beast's tail, and that's when Alicia realizes that the tails can emerge from the warriors' very own shadows. She urges her comrades to keep jumping as often as they need, so their shadows stay out of reach. When one of the tails comes for her, the heroine uses her heavenly sprint to dodge and quickly position herself for a counterattack. In that moment, Clevitis recognizes the intelligence of this particular opponent. Though not everyone is so quick-witted, Merlot, wielding his spear, calls forth the Earth Dragon. But despite the impressive display, the Black Beast is incomparably stronger, and with its many tails, it tears the Haiden warrior apart with depressing ease. Mudo rushes forward with his precision thrust, sending a bolt of energy through his sword. Clevitis reflects that it's been about 1,000 years since he last saw humans up close until Mudo is impaled and killed by another of the monster's tails. Amidst all the chaos, Alicia stuck to her strategy, the very thing that had kept her alive until now. Clevitis figured these humanoids were probably no more than vermin, so he couldn't imagine how they'd managed to get this far. Meanwhile, Katz was killed in brutal fashion, but Alicia Glenfall managed to push forward a few more yards. The beast wondered what these enemies were after and what could possibly have happened in these 1,000 years. Then, the heroine landed a blow on the creature's front horn with her sword, but it didn't leave a scratch. Clevitis thought, if humans were going to keep threatening his lands, he needed to see things with his own eyes. With that in mind, he unleashed overwhelming power and tore Alicia apart. Still alive, she begged her father's forgiveness for failing him and for never finding an answer to her dream. In the next scene, we shift to the kingdom of Haiden in the capital city of Hydrat, where a humanoid blacksmith works patiently at his forge. After finishing his shift, he steps out of the workshop and gazes at the moon, its light filtering through the chimney smoke. That's when Clevitis appears, Fury incarnate, throwing the city into panic. In his mind, he thinks of the beings who invaded his realm. Calling themselves heroes, they claim to be chosen by the king of Haiden. And that, he realizes, is why the Black Beast appeared. Royal crossbowmen take up positions to eliminate the intruder. Clevitis, hell-bent on revenge, intends to slaughter anyone in his path just as they did to his own kind. With his tails, he bats aside every bolt they fire, barely noticing the archers as he charges straight toward his true target, the king, who must be in Hydrat's capital. Watching the monster approach, the royal guards rally around the palace walls, manning their catapults and ballistae in a desperate attempt to hold the enemy at bay. As soon as Clevitis is in range, the siege engines are unleashed, but even those mighty projectiles are nothing against the force of the beast's tails. The closer he gets, the more convinced Clevitis becomes that these humanoids are nothing more than worms. Soon, his rampage leaves the palace walls in utter chaos. At that moment, the king of Haiden is warned of the Black Beast's invasion. Already knowing what's at stake, the monarch mourns the failure of the heroes and the fact that Haiden's blades never reached the level of Hydrite mana. Panicked, a soldier begs the king to flee, but the ruler sees no point in running when there's no escape. Instead, he orders the royal forge to be sealed, insisting that the fire of Haiden must not be extinguished. Around the wall, soldiers at the east gate open doors 1 through 6, readying the ballistae in each newly opened compartment. As the weapons are trained on their target, one soldier warns that their shot could hit the royal castle, but another insists that only His Majesty and the royal forge need to survive. All the while, Clevitis wonders what made those heroes so different from these opponents. The ballistae fire, but the beast catches the massive bolts as if they were made of paper. Clevitis suspects the hero's weapons must have been special. The woman's red blade, after all, managed to mark his horn. Even a worm armed with that could become a real threat. So, he hurls the bolts back at the defenders, smashing the castle's defenses to pieces. Realizing that these humanoids might improve their weapons over time, Clevitis decides it's time to assess just how dangerous they could truly become. Meanwhile, the king opens the door to Haiden's special forge. Seeing the access tunnel on the verge of collapse, he quickly slams the door shut in a desperate attempt to keep the beast out. But Clevitis is so monstrously powerful that he destroys the entire palace as if it were nothing more than a toy in his hands. Spotting the richly dressed figure, the beast remarks on the man's regal appearance and assumes he must be the king. The humanoid is stunned to hear Clevitis speak the human tongue. After all, he's just a monster. Clevitis warns the king to watch his words, for the fate of humanity hangs in the balance. This conversation won't just affect Haiden, but also Dun, Org, Slada, and Bent. All the lands of Edthia could be reduced to dust if these talks go south. Even if he destroys this kingdom and all its people, another clan will eventually rise elsewhere and bring havoc to the territory of magical beasts. Hoping to understand the nature and motives behind these beings, Clevitis asks the king of Haiden why he wished for his death. The king replies that a beast could never understand, and for that, his head is cut off. Even so, Clevitis claims he understands now. With that, the beast drops the wreckage of the fortress, its walls pierced by his tails, wreaking even more devastation. As he leaves the ruined land behind, he resolves to raise an army to wipe out humanity. Amidst the wreckage, Clevites finds a crying baby beside a young boy, barely clinging to life under the rubble. The boy pleads for the baby to be spared, but Clevites, unwavering in his resolve to exterminate every human, tells the boy to hate his fate for being born in Haiden. The wounded child protests the baby didn't choose where to be born, and the horrors the beast endured shouldn't be the reason for the innocent's death. But to Clevites, all humanoids are the same. Even if the baby is helpless today, one day it will grow up and take up a sword against the black beasts. Humanoids can't even agree on peace within their own lands, let alone lands that aren't theirs. Still, if the boy believes this tiny creature deserves to live, he must prove it right now. Sadly, the boy admits he can't. He's at death's door. Even so, he promises the child herself will become that proof. With those final words, the boy dies, and Clevites takes the baby with him. Truth be told, nothing the boy said had convinced him, but knowing how fast humanoids grow, Clevites is willing to wait and see what kind of proof this child might become. Next, we're told that the continent of Edthia was once home to 5 human clans. The first was called Dorn, the largest of them, all renowned architects and skilled warriors. From this clan emerged 2 great nations, Eslan and Boarate, which shared Dorn's central lands. The second clan was Org, a courageous forest people, gifted hunters and masters of herbal medicine. Third came the Slada, a clan of aquatic folk, talented sailors and swimmers who preferred to keep their distance from the others. The fourth, known as Bent, were wild barbarians who lived off the land and relied heavily on their own strength, though unity was sorely lacking among them. Finally, there was the Haiden, the oldest and most enigmatic clan of all, famed for their expertise in metallurgy and engineering. Their lands were ringed by mountains, making them the only civilization capable of forging black weapons from magic ore and mana. The secrets of this craft were closely guarded by the royal family, who lived in the capital, Hydrat. Through their weapons trade, they forged a long and storied alliance with Adorn. As the clans intermingled, most of the population became half Haiden. True-blooded Haidens grew increasingly rare. The world stretched far beyond Edthia, but none of the 5 clans knew what awaited them out there. The land of the Black Beasts encircled the continent, and the 4 Beast Kings blocked every path. Back in the present, on Moon Mountain, Black Beasts closed in on the tiny Haiden child, but Clevites intervened before she could be devoured, even if he had little patience to protect such a fragile, defenseless creature from every threat that crossed their path. To keep the baby in physical form, even if only temporarily, the beast used his extraordinary powers. But that didn't solve the underlying problem. The baby's only protection was a thin, vulnerable coat of hair that, while it looked like armor, left the child covered in her own filth. To fix this mess, the beast dropped the baby into a pit crawling with insects that fed solely on waste. Once she was cleaned, the child kept crying non-stop, wearing down her new guardian's patience by the second. Out of patience, Clevites swore that humanoid children grew up after just a few nights, but as time dragged on, he found himself regretting ever listening to that wounded woman in the rubble. Still, going back on his word would tarnish his reputation as king of the Black Beasts, so Clevites swallowed his pride and kept caring for the brat. After all, this wasn't just any child. This was the one who, supposedly, would prove that humanity deserved to survive. In the next scene, we glimpse a tragic memory from Alicia Glenfall, watching her father die right before her eyes. Consumed by rage, she longed to become a hero and take down the king of the Black Beasts. Snapping back to the present, Glenfall jolts awake with a massive scar across her left eye. Disoriented, she's convinced she must be dead, spotting Clevites right in front of her. She reaches for her sword only to realize it's missing. Clevites explains that he tossed the weapons of every intruder into the valley. But Alicia was different. She had value. The Beast King had revived her, and she could only move thanks to the magical blood he'd given her. In short, Alicia Glenfall was now undead, utterly bewildered. The heroine struggled to process what she just heard. Ready or not, Clevites revealed the real reason for bringing her back. He needed milk to feed the rescued child. Using mental powers, the monster could control the human's movements. Against her will, Alicia found herself desperately lifting her shirt. When not a drop of milk came out, Clevites was left perplexed. Alicia explained, embarrassed and humiliated, that only women who'd given birth could produce milk, and she was still a virgin. Humiliated beyond words, Alicia would rather have died than endure this. But even now, Clevites couldn't kill her. She carried his magical blood in her veins. Suddenly, the baby began to wail again. The monster grumbled that he could restore the child's physical strength. But hunger was another matter entirely. Alicia asked why on earth he was looking after a Haiden baby. But Clevites refused to say, only revealing that the child needed to grow into adulthood. Since Alicia couldn't help with milk, she'd have to be useful in some other way by becoming the baby's mother. A beast like him didn't have the know-how for that. Alicia protested that she'd never raised a child either, but seeing no way to argue with the beast, she advised Clevites to hire a wet nurse. If he didn't have any money, he could always trade some of the magic ore stored in his fortress. Fuming inside, Glenfall considered attacking the beast the first chance she got. But with no sword in hand and knowing full well she stood no chance against this king, her rage led nowhere. In the end, Clevites decided that finding a wet nurse was the top priority. Alicia, though, insisted there was no way they'd find a human willing to help a beast his size would throw the whole city into a panic. So, she offered to go instead, taking the baby to a wet nurse herself. Deep down, she just wanted to get the child as far away from this monster as possible. But Clevites turned her down. He couldn't risk the child dying out of his sight. Still, he realized he'd cause a full-blown catastrophe if anyone saw him like this in a human city. So, he chose to take on the form of the boy who'd watched over the baby among the ruins. Now, he and the baby needed names for their journey into the world of men. The Beast King became Clem, and the child was named Luna. Clem asked the woman's name, and she introduced herself as Alicia Glenfall from Soko Village. At last, the guardian put on shoes and a cloak and set out for the city. The next morning, Alicia bathes Luna in a nearby stream, quietly mourning the size of the scar over the child's eye. Clem soon appears, demanding to know if his servant has cleaned up after the baby. In fact, he criticizes absolutely everything Alicia does to care for the child, finding fault in even the smallest detail, never giving her a chance to defend herself. After all, this boy was, in reality, one of the 4 great kings of the Black Beasts. Taking Luna in his arms, Clem complains that Alicia brought him to her camp, only to find that there's nothing useful here. Alicia explains that anything useful for battle was left behind at an inn at the foot of the mountain. So Clem orders her to find some clean clothes to replace the blood-soaked ones. At every turn, the beast compares her to worms, insisting that even those filthy creatures are cleaner and healthier than a human. Each word only deepens Alicia's humiliation. Later, as she bathes and washes the tunic Luna had worn for protection, Alicia notices something. She had drawn the royal crest of Haydn onto the fabric. Meanwhile, a humanoid figure rides on horseback through the ruins of Hydrat, and the devastation only confirms his suspicion. Challenging one of the Beast Kings was the most reckless thing they could have done. Truth be told, he can't understand why the king chose to make the legend a reality now, especially when so many had dismissed it as nothing but a dream that could never come true. In the end, maybe there was something wrong with the king, and the crown princess was right to worry. Their plan had been to escape the castle with the child during the naming ceremony, but everything had gone down the drain. High on a mountain overlooking the destruction, an officer from Bent and his scouts survey the ruined city, remarking that the legend is, after all, still just a legend. A subordinate asks General Drell what they're supposed to do next, and the general tells him to take the fastest horse and send a message to the emperor. The legend is nothing but dust, with Hydrat Castle in ruins and the king dead. Haydn is now a land with no master, and it won't be just Bent eyeing the territory. Eslan certainly won't stand idly by, and it's likely the beasts of the southern mountains will push into the now weakened defenses. For the general, what matters most now is the secret technique for refining magic ore, handed down only through the royal family of Haydn. The top priority is to uncover that secret before the other nations do. So, the plan is to fall back to the border and regroup the army. Meanwhile, Maynard must stay behind to search for any surviving members of Haydn's royal family, and if he finds any, they must be captured alive. Back with Alicia, she questions Clem about the royal crest on Luna's tunic, wondering if the child might be of royal blood. To her surprise, Clem admits he had no idea. He didn't kidnap the baby for that reason at all. In fact, the child was entrusted to him by a human boy who looked just like the one whose clothes he now wears. At least now it makes sense that the baby was found in the rubble of the royal palace. Noticing Alicia's confusion, Clem explains that he was the one who destroyed Haydn's capital castle and killed the king, which only makes Alicia panic even more. The beast claims it was all self-defense. He was attacked first, while the heroine points out that, with the king dead, everyone will be searching for the child who can inherit the throne, especially because of the secret behind magic or refining. Rumor has it, only heirs to the kingdom can use Haydn's furnace. Given all this, Clem finds it increasingly logical to raise this little brat. He'll make the kid king and pull the strings from behind the scenes. It's the perfect position to eliminate Haydn's most important figures whenever he chooses. At this point, Alicia realizes she should have kept her mouth shut, but it's far too late now. Clem is already looking to find a wet nurse for Luna, so he orders Alicia to get ready and take the magic ore into town to get some money. With the ore slung across her back, Alicia reassures herself that everything will work out. Even if Clem gives Luna back, a strange horned boy could never be trusted as a close confidant. Those horns also grow among the people of Org, so they're not entirely rare. But since no one can confirm his identity, it wouldn't be enough, and even if Clem took another form, that wouldn't change anything. He can't hide those horns, and it's only a matter of time before he realizes it himself. Who knows how he'll react when he does. For some reason, this magical beast is obsessed with the child, and if anyone dares to harm Luna, humanity itself might pay the price. That's exactly what Alicia Glenfall must prevent from happening. In the end, maybe that's her only true role as a hero. Lost in these thoughts, Alicia panics when she sees a man attacking Clem and Luna with a club. The blow lands so hard it stretches the boy's neck, and the rest of the bandit gang closes in on them. Alicia is certain these mountain thieves are about to get what's coming to them, but suddenly, Clem collapses, bleeding heavily. The woman screams in despair and takes a blow that knocks her out cold. In the next scene, Glenfall relives the moment she was jolted awake in the carriage, on her way to meet the Beast King alongside her comrades. This time, as she wakes, she realizes it was nothing more than a bad dream, a nightmare, and that the 13 heroes are destined to defeat Clevites. But as she finally comes to, the warrior finds herself in a cage with other prisoners. Clem, wearing a crooked smile, tells her they've been captured. Alicia wonders how the kid can stay so calm in a situation like this, but he simply tells her there's nothing to worry about, Luna is fine, even though she was crying just a moment ago. Still confused, Alicia asks how Clevites could have gone down like that after only one hit. The boy admits it surprised him too. He didn't expect this skinny body, with its thin skin, to be so weak. Then Alicia wants to know why Klein doesn't just escape. He explains that now he's human, and until Luna takes the throne, he has to hide who he really is. Besides, he wants to see this side of the human world for himself. Apparently, everyone in this cart was kidnapped just like they were, and the boy is determined to figure out why. Alicia says the men who attacked them are mountain bandits, and since the prisoners are still alive, they're probably going to be sold as slaves. Klein asks how strong these bandits are. Alicia says they're nothing special compared to any regular adult, but the problem is they'll use any dirty trick to avoid losing. In short, they're a bunch of scum, and Klein shouldn't use them as a benchmark for judging humanity. After the journey, the caravan reaches a huge pit in the middle of the forest. The bandits unlock the chains and split up the prisoners, sending men and the elderly to one side, women and children to the other. Suddenly, one of the prisoners tries to make a run for it, but a bandit throws a knife into his back, ending his rebellion on the spot. With that done, the apparent leader steps forward and announces that they are the Crows, and anyone who steps out of line will be dealt with, no questions asked. As he finishes, he spots Alicia and leads her off to a separate building. At the door of another house, a woman orders Klein to come inside. When she notices a baby in the boy's arms, she calls out for a girl named Nell. Poor Nell stumbles in, as clumsy as ever, and falls to the floor. She quickly apologizes to Donna Carm, but the woman ignores her and tells Nell to take care of both the baby and the boy. As Nell looks at Luna, she can't help but be charmed. At the bottom of the pit, beneath a thick layer of water, lies a magical sword and possibly other creatures lurking in that submerged world. Meanwhile, the bandit takes Alicia to a man called Vroko. As soon as he's addressed by that name, he corrects the man he only wants to be called boss now. Zazak is long dead, so he's in charge. Another bandit complains that he made that decision on his own, but Vroko assures them he can convince anyone who disagrees with the help of his favorite little monster, Betty. When Alicia actually sees the troll with her own eyes, a terrible beast from the west, she can't help but wonder how anyone could tame a creature like that. Vroko grabs the bag Alicia was carrying, realizing it contains ores from Moon Mountain, a place protected by Clevites. The boss recalls the recent story. The king of Haydn gave regalias to 13 heroes and sent them to defeat the great king of the Black Beasts. But apparently, they failed. There was even talk that one of the heroes was a woman. Vroko notes that magical ore this pure doesn't show up anywhere near people. After implying that Alicia knows a lot more than she lets on, he comments on her impressive physique. Since she didn't wet herself in fear when facing Betty, he suspects she might really be one of the heroes sent to Moon Mountain. By the way, he mentions that Hydrat was destroyed by Clevites, which, as far as the Crows are concerned, is excellent news. With that, Vroko draws his weapon and points it at Alicia. She's stunned by the sight of the reddish blade. Vroko confirms that it's made of the steel that only the royal family can forge, monohydrite. The stronger the red, the purer the metal. Still, he admits his weapon is fake. After all, they don't just deal in human beings in this business. Magic swords bring in a fortune, and the suckers buying them never know the difference. Besides, Vroko mentions that, from what he's heard, every member of the royal family died in the castle during the beast's attack. Now, if there's no more monohydrite after Hydrat's fall, The value of these magic weapons will skyrocket just like the regalias and the purest blades forged by kings of old. If things keep going this way, Vroko and his crows will be filthy rich. And as if that weren't enough, they've figured out how to store regalias, a complicated technique with only two possible ways to do it. Either be recognized as a hero by the king, or take the regalia from a hero. Of course, stealing is easier, especially since most of those chosen warriors die in wars out in the land of beasts. Sure, it's tough to reach such dangerous places. But that's why the heavens have just delivered a heroine to the crows, right at this most opportune moment. Vroko asks what happened to Alicia's regalia, but she says nothing. He insists she must have dropped it while fleeing from Clevelis, just like the other 12 probably did. Either way, the boss orders Dagarn and Sachai to take her tomorrow to retrieve her regalia. Dagarn questions if, since she's really a hero, maybe she should go get it herself. Vroko curses the bald man, explaining that Alicia knows the whereabouts of 13 weapons, and until she brings all of them to the crows, she can't be killed. Finally, he tells them to get moving with the girl, and if she tries to resist, they can wear her out however they please. The henchmen, delighted by the prospect, drag Alicia out, promising to give her a good time. Meanwhile, Klein is stuck working in a tavern full of drunk bandits. In a corner near the fireplace, Nell is nursing Luna her very first job as a wet nurse. When a customer comes in and barks at her to bring more drinks, Nell leaves Luna behind to get to work, constantly mistreated and looked down on by everyone there. Another customer asks Klein to bring him more meat, so the boy makes his rounds, serving everyone who's shown an interest in the food. The customer who'd been flirting with Carm comments that this kid's quite a fine obedient, and all but the woman confesses the boy gives her the chills. With those horns, he's probably got orc blood, but his skin is as pale as snow. And then there are those strange eyes. Meanwhile, Nell was carrying more drinks into the hall when a customer sticks his leg out on purpose, making her trip and shatter the jugs. As if that weren't enough, the men responsible for the prank blame her and treat her even more harshly, while Klein watches coldly as the two men drag the girl outside. Overhearing the other customers, Clevitus figures that pair are about to make Nell's life even worse. Sure enough, outside the tavern, the men smack the girl's backside as punishment. When they're done with her, they leave Nell behind. Even after what she's just been through, she swallows her tears and goes to check on Luna. Meanwhile, the two men walk back to the tavern, mocking Nell, saying she's as ugly as a cow. Suddenly, they start to stagger, cough up blood, collapse, and are swallowed up by Klein's shadow. With that done, the beast compliments the wet nurse on her magnificent breasts and suggests they have a little chat. Later, as Nell nurses Luna, she's asked about her past. She admits she's really part of this gang of thieves. She was born here and has always been one of the crows. Nell never knew her father. She had a mother, but only ever saw her from behind. She can't even remember what her face looked like. Given how her mother was treated, she was probably a slave too. And Nell often watched from a distance as terrible things were done to her. Nell's mother disappeared when she was 12, and the girl never found out what really happened. All Nell knows is that after that, all the violence fell on her instead. She was beaten so badly she lost almost all her teeth. These days, she can only hear out of one ear. It was only then that she realized how much her mother had protected her, and at what cost. From then on, Nell lived like an animal. Things got a little better when Miss Carm arrived, offering advice on how to deal with the men. Just give them a little attention, enough to satisfy them so they'd leave her alone. Of course, Nell knows she'll never be like Miss Carm, but things are much better than before, and she's found a way to be useful. She produces plenty of milk, so she can always nurse the little ones. Klein had heard that only women who've given birth can produce milk, so he asks where Nell's baby is. At this, Nell lowers her head and says her child was stillborn. The baby moved inside her, but when he was born, he didn't cry, and Nell blames herself for that. When she felt that tiny body going cold, Nell's whole world turned to darkness. She honestly wouldn't have cared if she died right then. At least she'd get to see her son in the afterlife. But when she came to, Nell felt something warm on top of her. She opened her eyes to find a baby, about 6 months old, clinging to her breast, a child she'd never seen before. The little boy was desperate for milk, and seeing that need, Nell decided to hang on, if only to comfort that baby. Another day, a different child appeared, but where they came from and where they went, Nell has no idea. After that, Nell had to give birth to a second, and then a third, stillborn child. Even so, she had to keep going. There were still children like Luna who needed her milk. She wanted to give those babies a chance at happiness, since her own never got that chance. After hearing all this, Klein reaches out and tells her he wants to hire her as Luna's wet nurse. Even though he doesn't trust people, he sees real kindness in Nell, and more importantly, Luna clearly likes her. So Clevitus makes his final offer. Either Nell comes with him and feeds Luna, or she stays and keeps being the crow's punching bag for the rest of her life. On this, Nell admits it's tempting. but she has to turn him down. Klein's still a slave, and she needs to care for the children who are still to come. Back to Alicia. On the way to the Moon Mountain, she's carried to a bridge by Dagarn and Sachai. Before she can even think about jumping, they warn her if she does, she won't land in the lake. The drop forms a funnel, and it's much more likely she'll wind up a pancake on the rocks below. Alicia looks down and realizes this place is actually a magical ore mine. She probably knows this spot better than she thought. She scans her surroundings and notices a man with a rope heading to the edge of a small dock. Dagarn laughs at yet another fool with nothing to live for, while Sachai explains it's tied to the legend of the hero Cordwar. That's exactly what Alicia was thinking. This was the site of Cordwar's final expedition, the Well of the Alba Mine. The man with the rope calls out to the men behind him to keep their promise, while his wife, desperate, wishes him luck. Then the man jumps into the water, and Alicia is horrified. If the legend is true, there's something down there. Sachai confirms her fears, saying the same creatures that killed Cordwar are still in the water. Right on cue, a water beast surfaces, its dinner caught in its jaws, the very man who just tried his luck and lost his life. Two more creatures join in, fighting over the meat, while the man's wife screams in terror. Alicia shudders, cold with fear, as she witnesses such brutality. These aquatic beasts, known as the Arvensis, arrived with the waters 3 centuries ago and forced the miners to abandon this well. Not even Cordwar, the greatest hero of his age, was able to defeat those terrifying monsters, and back then, there was still solid ground to stand on and fight. Cordwar's regalia, the Flow Divider, earned its name because, as legend has it, it once split a waterfall in 2 before the king's very eyes. That's the weapon challengers are hoping to find when they throw themselves into the water. Sachai didn't even know that sword had a name. He asks if Alicia's weapon has one too, but she refuses to reveal its name to a scoundrel like him. According to her, even though they promised freedom to the man who jumped into the well, there wasn't even a rope for him to climb back out. In other words, nobody ever intended to let him leave alive, a move worthy of useless wretches like the crows. Hearing this, Dagarn points out that perhaps Alicia hasn't grasped her current situation. Her hands are tied, heavy iron balls are chained to her feet, and she's standing on a swaying rope bridge. On top of that, across the bridge, there's a crowd of men itching to make the damsel scream like a pig. On that note, the most deranged of them can't hold back any longer and leaps at his prey, sending the bridge swinging dangerously. Sachai shouts at Pito to pay attention, but being blind, the lunatic just replies that he's not afraid of heights. In fact, he can sense a lot just by smell and sound. He can follow every movement that girl makes. The scent of a woman, the pounding of her heart, it all tells him she's tense, and that gets him even more excited. First things first, Pito plans to cut Alicia's clothes and show her naked to everyone. But just then, the heroine speaks. "Who would have thought I'd ever be grateful for my curse?" With those words, she dislocates her own shoulders to bring her arms to the front and attacks Pito. In the chaos, his knives accidentally slice through one of the bridge's ropes, sending both of them plummeting. As Dagarn had warned, they don't fall into the water. Instead, they crash onto the rocks below, their bodies utterly destroyed. When the crow's henchmen saw the woman shattered on the floor, panic set in. They wondered if they should head down and hide her body, because if Rocco found out she was dead, they'd really be doomed. Meanwhile, Alicia's eyes rolled back in their sockets, then fluttered open as she regained consciousness. She was definitely alive, but she couldn't feel her body from the neck down. Maybe her bones had turned to dust, and on top of that, she'd lost way too much blood. Still, as critical as her situation was, this wasn't the time to be lost in thought. The thugs could show up any second. Suddenly, the blood of the not-so-dead woman began to move on its own, swirling until it formed the image of Clevitas above her body. Speaking through this illusion, the beast mocked her for ending up in such a pathetic state. Alicia asked why the monster looked like a baby, and he replied that his form depended on the amount of magical blood, which was the only thing keeping her alive. If all that blood left her body, she'd be gone for good. For now, as long as the girl was useful, Clevitas would keep forcing the magical blood back into her however many times it took. With that blood returned, the heroine could regenerate instantly, except for any body parts completely lost. Alicia pressed him. Why not just help her recover now, since he needed her? Clevitas took the chance to ask his own question. While they'd been wandering around, the shadowy beast had found a wet nurse for Luna, named Nell. Nell belonged to the gang, and even for someone like Clevitas, a demon, he found the way she was treated here shockingly cruel. He figured she'd jump at the chance to escape, but she simply refused, and Clevitas wanted to know why. Alicia guessed it was because Nell saw Klein as just another slave. Besides, a gang like this would never let her just walk away. They'd chase her to the ends of the earth for payback. In other words, Nell simply didn't believe she could ever escape. Faced with all this, the only practical way to save her was to end the gang before they could end her. As Dagarn and Sachai made their way down the stairs toward Alicia, She reasoned that wiping out the crows should be easy for a demon, but Clevitas disagreed. If anyone discovered he'd left Moon Mountain, he'd be in a tight spot, and he couldn't allow outsiders to think they could take advantage. If someone started sniffing around for the reason the lord of that mountain was out and about, that'd be another problem. Plus, Clevitas had to look after Luna. Taking all this into account, he made it clear Alicia would be the one to wipe out the crows. It wasn't exactly unheard of for a hero to take down a gang like this. Panic rising, Alicia tried to argue heroes weren't superhuman. After all, but Clevitas didn't care for excuses. He wanted results. He began pumping blood back into the warrior's body, regenerating her as he did. The two henchmen arrived, barely believing their eyes. The woman who'd been utterly broken was now writhing as if she were some monstrous thing. As her bones knit back together, Alicia let out a scream so loud it echoed across the entire mountain, drawing the attention of every crow in the area. Each time her bones reconnected, pain shot through her, and as more henchmen crowded the space, terror gripped them at the grotesque sight. Even so, despite her being a hero, they had her hopelessly outnumbered, and they'd do whatever it took to force her to lead them to the 13 regalia. One of the thugs lunged first, slashing her left arm with a sword. Alicia took the blow, grabbed the bandit, and sent him flying with a punch. Snatching up his sword, she freed herself from her shackles and grabbed his filthy eye patch to cover the huge scar on her face. Meanwhile, Klein was making his way to the village, carrying Luna in his arms. Hoping to convince Nell it was finally safe to run, Luna cried, and Klein reassured her. Alicia was far stronger than she seemed. She was the only human who'd ever managed to scratch his horn. Inside the tavern, Nell returned only to get scolded by Carm, who assumed she'd taken so long because she'd been satisfying those two men. But when Nell explained she'd just been nursing the baby, Carm relaxed a little. Still, wanting to keep the girl safe, Carm reminded her she should always do what the men wanted before they decided to get violent. She told Nell to clean the kitchen, but also wanted to know what had her in such a good mood. Nell commented that Carm was an outsider, but she herself had been born among the crows, making her wonder what the world outside was really like. Carm didn't know what to say. Most of the women here had either lost their homes out there or done something bad and ended up here. In Carm's case, her memories of the outside weren't good ones. When she said this, she asked Nell if she was thinking of running away, and Nell said no. But a slave had invited her to leave, which had made her wonder what lay beyond. Hearing this, Carm slapped her, warning that men would only use her and throw her away once they tired of her, just like always. But a tinge of bitterness crept into her voice as she asked why a useless girl like Nell had been asked to run away instead of her. She raised her hand again. At that moment, Vroko, having overheard the conversation, stepped in, teaching them that you can't go around hitting your friends. Tail between her legs, Carm muttered it was rare to see the boss there. He explained he'd heard something special was happening and wanted to check it out. Carm quickly sent Nell to fetch the baby, and Nell said the little one was in the barn. Deciding the child needed fattening up, Vroko called Nell to follow him somewhere else. Carm tried to stop him for a moment, but the second the boss glanced her way, she gave up. When Nell is taken away, her mistress falls into despair, wondering what to do now that Nell is the only one who can feed the babies. Speaking of babies, Klein appears, cradling Luna in his arms. Assuming the boy is looking for food for the child, Carm explains that, unfortunately, they no longer have a wet nurse. Nell wished for something she couldn't have, and now she's being punished for it. Klein tells her to explain further, and as she looks into his eyes, she feels something strange about that monstrous form. As for Nell, she's taken to an underground place she's never seen before, even though she was born there. Vroko tells her it used to be a magical ore mine, which explains the small tunnels everywhere. According to him, the fuel for the lamps everyone uses is a mix of oil and a particular insect with melted magical ore. This ore, he says, can be used for much more than just forging swords. They began calling this process magic, and before joining the Ravens, he spent years researching it. On the way, Nell kicks a human skull and panics, but Vroko insists they're just rat bones. This place is always infested. About the research he mentioned, Vroko suddenly extinguishes his lamp, plunging the place into total darkness. A few seconds later, the light flickers back on, and there's Betty the troll standing right behind Nell. Vroko explains that, in his research, he used to mix powdered magical ore with all sorts of drugs and used it to control black beasts. The leader makes it clear the Ravens never forgive traitors, and Nell's tiny wish to leave the group already counts as betrayal. So, the girl will become Betty's dinner. And with that, Betty lunges at her. Nell, running for her life, thinks that maybe she could have survived if only she'd held that slave boy's hand. spotting Luna up ahead. She whispers an apology for not being able to feed the baby anymore. That's when Betty swallows Nell, making the baby burst into tears. Klein gently tells the child not to cry eating, and being eaten is just the natural order of things. Animals, humans, even black beasts, if they're hungry, they have to eat, or else they'll die. Vroko hears his voice and asks who the brat is. Klein finishes his little lesson, declaring that no one is to blame for Nell being eaten, except himself, for not getting there in time. Putting that aside, the boy wonders what a proud Western troll is doing at the mercy of a tiny humanoid, because that's not the natural order at all. Vroko has no idea what this kid's been drinking, but if he can stay calm in front of Betty, it must be something good. Either way, it's a shame for the Ravens' leader to lose a Hydnian baby, but given the circumstances, it is what it is. So, Vroko orders Betty to eat them both, but instead, the troll starts acting strange until she suddenly vomits Nell out, the girl's body mangled and broken. Klein notes that Betty's fear was so great, she had to cough up everything. Seeing that Nell is still breathing, the boy neutralizes the stomach acid and places Luna next to the wet nurse, asking the baby to stay by her side until her final breath. With that, the great king of black beasts uses a horn made of shadows to whisk Nell and Luna away. Vroko accuses Klein of being a magic user, but the boy claims he doesn't even know what that is. Vroko insists magic might be a recent discovery, but he's no fool. In fact, it was his generation that invented the foundations of sorcery, and speaking of which, he decides to give the snot-nosed brat a quick lesson. He pulls from his pocket a powder made from magical ore, various herbs, and mashed larvae of a parasitic fly. These larvae, he explains, destroy the host's ability to think, making them easy to control, exactly what he's doing with Betty, the female troll. But one day, he plans to perfect his recipe until he can control all the black beasts. With that, he drops the vial into the lamp, letting it react with the flame and release a magical smoke that fills the cavern. As soon as Betty inhales the fumes, she falls completely under his control once more, and Vroko orders her to devour Klein. The troll quickly closes in and lands a punch that sends the boy flying. As he's pummeled, Clevitus realizes that, in this human form, he actually feels the pain of the blows. What's more, he's annoyed Alicia never said a word about this magic business. Speaking of the heroine, she slices through more bandits before the fight suddenly hits a pause. Panting with exhaustion, she's still surrounded by countless enemies, when Sachai charges at her, forcing the warrior to react with lightning speed. That move takes us back to a memory from Alicia Glenfall's childhood, when she injures her hand and drops her wooden sword after striking a rock too hard. Her father laughs and tells her that's what happens when you hit something tougher than your weapon. To soften the impact, he instructs her to grip the handle firmly, but keep her wrists just a bit loose. Excited, Alicia asks how she can get even stronger, and her father explains she should never hesitate to hurt her enemy, to use whatever technique she must, and never hesitate to feel pain, because hesitation makes your body stiff, and that stiffness weakens and slows down your attack. Once all that stiffness is gone, Alicia will become much more powerful. But above all, the most important thing is to trust her sword, and the strength she's putting into every swing. Taking her father's teachings to heart, Glenfall has already racked up 8 fallen foes. Sachai starts to wonder if this woman is even human, while Dagarn, realizing he can't win with technique, opts for brute force. He delivers a blow with his hammer so powerful it snaps Alicia's blade in half and sends her crashing to the ground. Fed up with a poor quality sword, she tosses what's left of it aside and gets up as if she'd only tripped, leaving the men around her even more stunned by her vitality. Knowing she needs a better sword, Glenfall sprints off, trying to lose the gang. With 50 enemies, she won't be able to beat them all without resting first, because even though she's immortal, her stamina is nearly gone, and the magical blood that heals her seems to be draining her strength faster than she can recover. Now, whatever happens, Alicia can only imagine what these guys would do to her if they caught her. So, even though she's exhausted, she somehow manages to keep going, no matter what. Up ahead, she reaches the edge of the old diving platform, the one that leads straight into a lake teeming with shadowy beasts. The truth is, Alicia needs the legendary sword resting at the bottom of those dark waters. With that in mind, she bolts toward the platform, making the bandits hesitate for a moment. After all, people have been jumping into that lake for 300 years, and not one has ever made it out alive. Watching the Arvensis, Alicia sees them circling, waiting for someone to fall in so they can feed. She grabs a stray axe lying on her path and dashes across the scaffolding, forcing the bandits to chase after her again. If she escaped that way, she'd be gone for good. Finding no way out, Alicia ends up trapped at the top. So, she hacks at a few ropes with the axe and waits for the bandits to start climbing. When they're all making their way up the structure, Alicia hurls the axe at a particular rope, sending the entire scaffolding crashing down into the water, a feast the lake's beasts won't soon forget. Most of the henchmen are flung into the lake, but a few, like Sachai and Dagarn, manage to cling on for dear life and avoid the fall. Looking around, they're left wondering, where did the captive heroine go? Hidden inside a barrel to conceal herself underwater, Alicia Glenfall sinks slowly, relying on the one advantage the legendary hero didn't have: she can't drown. Before she jumped, Alicia forced every bit of air from her lungs. Now, all that's left is to wait, sinking deeper and deeper, until she reaches the bottom of the lake. Although it's impossible for her to die in this situation, Alicia can't shake off a terrible sense of suffocation. Her head throbs, her vision blurs as the barrel sinks, and every inch of her body screams in agony as if she's fighting to survive in her own way. Still, she has to endure until she reaches that sword. After a few seconds that feel like an eternity, Glenfall finally touches the bottom of the lake, barely conscious from the pain. Yet, driven by an unbreakable will, she forces herself to reach out in search of the weapon she came for. That's when a vivid red glow catches her eye up ahead, and Alicia suddenly realizes she might actually pull this off. With fresh determination, she gathers what little strength she has left and pushes herself to swim faster toward the object she needs, even though her limbs are heavy and every part of her feels numb. But there's no turning back now, no abandoning the treasure sword. Only with it can Alicia make it back to the surface. The blade is the only thing that can give her enough power. After what seems like endless struggle, she finally manages to grab hold of the sword, only to discover that it isn't resting on the lakebed at all. Instead, it's perched atop the head of a colossal aquatic creature, so massive it seems to form the lake's very floor. In a panic, Alicia is flung backward by the monster's sudden movement. For a moment, she wonders how on earth something like this managed to hide in the Elba mine's well. Spotting the sword just behind her, she strains desperately to get to it. But just as her hand reaches out, she's caught in a powerful current and pulled straight toward the monster's gaping mouth. At the very last second, though, Alicia manages to snatch the treasure sword. Sword in hand, Alicia's mind flashes back to something her father once told her as a child. He'd said that, while she might never be as physically strong as a man, she was unmatched when it came to drawing out a sword's true power. That's why, he said, Alicia would make a great hero. With those words echoing in her mind, Alicia Glenfall whirls her sword around and smashes the monster's teeth right as they close in on her, even as her abdomen is ripped open by the suction. The undead hero calls forth the sword's flow divider. By tracing a slash with this weapon, she can split the water itself, using a sweeping horizontal stroke that propels her forward like a fish. Riding this current, Alicia bolts away from the colossal creature. Guessing that it must have been the one that defeated the legendary hero, its size is so extraordinary, it's hard to believe it even comes from this world. In Alicia's mind, it feels more like one of the ancients, shadowy beasts said to live for tens of thousands of years, sleeping for ages and rarely emerging. From the looks of it, the miners must have accidentally unearthed this thing while digging for ore. Looking up, Alicia notices the Arvensis are already aware of the monster's presence and have begun to stir closer to the surface. Even with the regalia boosting her strength, she's still out of air and in no shape to fight. But the Arvensis aggression forces her hand, and she's left with no choice but to use whatever strength remains to fight back as she heads for the surface. At last, Alicia bursts out of the water, gasping for breath harder than she ever has in her life, spitting out mouthfuls of lake water. The bandits stare in disbelief as their enemy resurfaces with the sword just as the monstrous beast emerges as well, terrifying the humans in a way they'll never forget. With its tentacles, the black creature snatches more victims, paralyzing them with a fear that only grows. Meanwhile, Alicia dodges blow after blow, trying to gain enough distance to mount a counterattack. As she'd hoped, her regalia slices through the monster's body with ease, though she can only reach its tentacle tips. It's clear, no hero could ever defeat an ancient alone, and even the Arvensis keep their distance, merely observing the giant from afar. Given the circumstances, Alicia decides to make her escape, but then Dagarn and Sachai begin begging the hero for help, promising to do whatever she wants if she saves them. Alicia, however, makes it clear she's no longer the hero everyone expects. Instead, she's a slave to something far more terrifying than that ancient. With those words, the undead warrior slips away through the scaffolding, leaving the bandits to their fate against the ancient beast, which swallows most of the men in a single gulp, leaving the rest to the Arvensis, who tear each other apart for the last scraps of flesh. With that, Alicia Glenfall considers her mission against the Ravens complete. Most of them are dead now, and with the ancient awakened, the survivors definitely won't stick around. It's not exactly a glorious victory, but at least she got the sword she wanted. Suddenly, Klein contacts his servant through their magical blood bond, like a form of telepathy. At first, Alicia is startled, but she calms down once her master explains the magic. Even though he didn't see what happened, he knows she finished the job, thanks to what their blood shared, and it sounds like quite the ordeal. Alicia replies that ordeal is an understatement. She had to defeat an entire gang and then face an ancient at the bottom of a pitch-black well. She asks why she didn't get any help, considering the King of Beasts saw everything. To that, Klein explains he's busy dealing with his own problem. Even as Clevites, now in human form, he's been left vulnerable to a technique he's never seen before. In fact, he accuses Alicia of hiding the existence of this magic. So, after witnessing the entity defeat the troll Betty, Klein threatens to punish his undead hero. Meanwhile, Vroko flees in terror, struggling to comprehend what the hell that boy is. Because Klein just struck down the troll with magic, a feat the Raven leader never imagined possible. On his way out, he stumbles over Nell's body, still lying with Luna by her side. Faced with this unexpected gift from the gods, the criminal grins from ear to ear. Still on top of Betty, Klein notices Alicia arriving. She asks about the strange red smoke, but Clevitus ignores the question and instead asks about the sword the heroine is holding. Desperate, Alicia grips the weapon tightly and declares that there's no way the Black Beast is getting it. She risked her life to get that sword. Klein shrugs, explaining that the smoke is causing trouble. But apparently, it only affects black beasts, not normal animals like Alicia. For example, he can't smell anything, and his ears are ringing. He could transform and blow all the smoke away, but the place is far too cramped for that. And besides, no one knows where Luna is. To make things worse, the only one keeping the baby company is Nell, who's practically dead. She can't even move, and the red smoke is blocking the beast from smelling them. Given all that, Clevites orders Alicia to do something, since she's supposed to know about this thing called magic. Alicia admits that she's aware magic exists, but she has no talent for it at all. According to her, some people can use magic and others just can't. Magic runs on ore for everything, and for most people, ore is just an ordinary rock. But for those who know how to use it, in theory, it's possible to draw out its hidden power. Hearing this, Klein calls her useless, which really ticks her off. She shouts that the Black Beast killed plenty of heroes who could actually use magic if they weren't wiped out. They'd be able to help right now. But Clevites couldn't care less about her angry rant and decides to look for Luna and Nell himself, though he figures they're probably already dead. Alicia asks what Klein will do if Luna is dead, and he says he'll do nothing. He'll simply lose all interest in humanity. Alicia sees that as a thinly veiled threat, because the beast's look made it clear. If anything happened to Luna, he wouldn't hesitate to wipe out every last human. The only thing holding him back is Luna. So Alicia knows she has to find the baby no matter what. At one point during their search, the pair notices a trail of blood, which might be Nell's. Since she can't move on her own, it looks like someone dragged her away. But in reality, Nell wasn't being dragged by someone else. She was actually holding onto Vroko's cloak, determined not to let him get away with Luna. Fed up with the girl's persistence, the leader of the crows stomps hard on her head. After all, his cloak is made from the feathers of the black feathered bird, not exactly cheap. Even after all those kicks, Nell just wouldn't let go, even though she was barely hanging on to life. A few minutes earlier, when Luna was being kidnapped, Vroko got close and was smacked by the child, who then started crying so loudly that it made the enchanted lantern explode, a sign of serious magical talent. Seeing that Luna was a pure-blooded Hydenian with such potential, Vroko figured he'd struck gold. Of course, he had no intention of letting go of the kid, so he decides to cut off Nell's hand to escape as quickly as possible. But then Alicia Glenfall comes running in, stopping him before he can do it. Terrified, the gang leader asks what happened to Dagarn and Sachai. Alicia starts to answer, but Clevitus cuts in to say that by now, both of them have become Black Beast dung, but at least they served as food, so they weren't totally useless. To Clevitus, it doesn't matter how you're born or what you do with your life, because everyone ends up as food in the end. Looking at Nell, the Black Beast sees she's used every last ounce of strength she had. Vroko threatens to cut off one of Luna's fingers for every step his enemies take. Klein tells him to do whatever he wants, leaving the bandit completely stunned. Alicia explains that the guy isn't bluffing, he really would hurt a baby. The beast responds that he can heal any wound in an instant. Still, Alicia knows pain can't be erased, so she decides to handle this herself. So, Alicia offers to trade the sword she risked her life to get in exchange for the baby. Vroko notices the Haiden crest and the red light pulsing from the blade clear signs it's a Haiden regalia, the weapon he's always wanted. She drives the sword into the wall behind him, making it obvious he's got what he wanted. But now, to pull the sword free, Vroko will need both hands, meaning he'll have to put Luna down if he wants his prize. He can run away with the sword if he wants, but if he tries anything against Luna, the heroine promises to tear him apart. Vroko is stunned by how easily a hero gave up a Haiden regalia. It only confirms that the baby must be a real Hydenian worth far more than a single sword, even one with the crest. Greedy as ever, he wants the deal to be fair, so he demands the location of all 13 weapons Alicia Glenfall's companions used during the Moon Mountain mission. Seeing Alicia hesitate, Klein tells her to spill it, and she reveals the weapons are at the bottom of the canyon, in the Great Cave on Moon Mountain. now that he has the information. Vroko just needs to make sure he doesn't get killed along the way. He smashes a vial containing an invisibility spell and vanishes, using Luna's magical power to boost the spell's effect even further. He's able to hide both himself and the baby. But since he can't pull the Cordwar sword out of the wall without revealing his position, he leaves it behind. No big deal, because now he's after 13 more hero weapons. And with the Hydenian baby in tow, the Crow leader feels unstoppable. But Alicia steps right in front of where he's standing and lands a brutal horizontal slash across his stomach with her magic sword. Stunned, Vroko asks how she could see him. She admits she couldn't, but she's not deaf. She could hear Luna crying. Turns out, Vroko was so impressed with his own cunning that he didn't realize the baby's crying gave away his exact position. Now, he's been sliced in two thanks to her deadly attack. After Klein wiped Luna's invisibility dust away, Alicia decided to make the dead bandit invisible too. Then, turning to Nell, she pointed out that they'd only managed to save the baby thanks to that girl. Since the wet nurse was still breathing, Alicia asked Klein if there was anything he could do to save her. Klein explained that he couldn't control more than one person at a time with the magic blood, and besides, Nell was missing too many body parts. He'd have to take pieces from somewhere else just to patch her up. In his opinion, it simply wasn't worth the effort to save a mere humanoid. Still, Alicia insisted that they had to do something, since the poor woman had fought to the very end to protect Luna. If that was the case, Clevitis made it clear, for Nell to use the magic blood, Alicia would have to die. But the heroine didn't hesitate, sacrificing herself for the hope and future of those she was meant to protect. That was her job. At least, that's what her father had always told her. Besides, she'd already died once before, so dying again wasn't really a big deal. So, showing no sign of being moved by this heroic gesture, Klein drew Alicia's blood without the slightest ceremony and revived Nell, using whatever parts of the heroine's body were still salvageable. And, against all expectations, Clevitis found that Alicia Glenfall actually survived the transfusion. She'd wake up soon, although it would take her a long time to recover. After all, she was basically rotting away. He had to admit, this human was tougher than he'd given her credit for. Sure enough, Alicia started twitching bizarrely on the ground until she finally came to, and the first thing she did was grab her favorite sword, hugging it like a child. Meanwhile, Klein handed Luna over to Nell, but from now on, he started calling her Nelleru, not just to give her a second chance at life, but also to let her become someone new. With that, he invited her to join their group, and finally free, Nelleru happily accepted. With the new member now on board, the next day, Klein decides to confiscate Alicia's sword since it's far too conspicuous. Let's be honest, it'd be a problem if anyone else tried to steal it. The knight nearly bursts into tears as she watches Zenbaku being absorbed into the shadow of Clevitis, who, by the way, tells her she should be grateful he didn't just toss her toy out. Right then, Nelleru shows up and casually mentions that the master can use some pretty amazing magic. Klein asks if she's ready, and the girl assures him she is. She figured she'd feel bad about taking stuff without asking. But honestly, it wasn't that big of a deal. In fact, she even found some clothes for Luna. Alicia points out that Nelleru's carrying way too much baggage, but for some odd reason, Nelleru feels incredibly light, as if her body weighs nothing at all. This makes the heroine half joke that maybe Klein stitched together some bandit's torso, just to bring this girl back to life. Incidentally, Nelleru rather oddly makes it clear she's the group's official porter now and can carry whatever the knight needs, whether it's a sword or a shield. Alicia points out she doesn't even have a weapon for her friend to carry, so Nelleru suggests she go check Vroko's office. There are always valuable items stashed away there. The moment Alicia hears this, she bolts off toward the office, determined not to leave Elba's mine pit empty-handed. Meanwhile, Nelleru admits that this heroine is actually way cooler than she expected. Clint, though, says she's a bit clueless, but still a good person. Besides, thanks to her efforts, all the bandits were wiped out. Now, with the slaves free and no masters left, the whole region has been deserted. Klein asks if Nelleru's going to miss this place, but she makes it clear she has no fond memories here. Still, it's where she lived with her mother, so seeing it all like this does make her a little sad. She wishes she'd at least had the chance to say goodbye to Donna Carm. Klein is about to ask something about Carm when suddenly they're interrupted by a man who's appeared out of nowhere after searching high and low for the brat who uses strange techniques. Meanwhile, Alicia bursts into the Raven's leader's office with all the subtlety of an elephant and immediately finds a stash of cash in his desk drawer. As she pockets the money, she can't help but wonder who the real thief is now. Next, she opens another drawer and finds a few risque women's leather armors. Shaking her head, she tries to banish the mental image of Vroko wearing something like that. Convinced he probably just sniffed the armor or something, she decides to try one on herself, reasoning that even if she's hard to kill, Pain is still pain, and it's best to avoid it. In the next drawer, she discovers a selection of swords, so she tests one out, delighted by how light and balanced it feels, even if it's nowhere near the level of a true hidden black weapon. Suddenly, Clem comes crashing violently through the office wall, still complaining about how weak this body he's possessing is. Their attacker appears moments later, and Alicia instantly draws her sword, ready for a fight. She takes a lightning-fast kick, barely dodging at the last moment, though just the wind from the blow is enough to leave a cut on her face. The stranger follows up with a flurry of kicks while levitating mid-air, forcing the heroine to do her best just to block his attacks. Upping the ante, the mysterious figure unleashes a wind skill so powerful that it rips up the ground, hurling Alicia through the office ceiling and outside. She crashes hard onto the roof of another building before slamming to the ground, but somehow she manages to stand, even if it takes everything she's got. The fighter says he's only after the child and will spare Alicia if she hands over Luna. Alicia tells him not to underestimate a hero, and he quickly realizes she's not going to give up that easily. Just then, Alicia's eyes lose their irises as she gets ready to try a strategy that, if it failed, would leave her with only one last resort: the Flow Divider. With that, using her secret blade, Ascending Dragon, the warrior charges, her sword crackling with powerful magic. And in a flash, she's right at her opponent's neck. But just as she's about to finish things, she's stopped by Clen's magic and even gets punched in the head by him. He asks if she erased every thought from her mind except for killing, and she explains that's exactly how the technique works. Clen reveals that their attacker only lashed out because of a misunderstanding, and if he hadn't stepped in, Alicia would have taken a knee to the gut that would have torn her in half. Since it's just a misunderstanding, the man demands an explanation. He notes that Nelleru smells like a Western troll. He'd heard there was someone around here who could control a creature like that. Nelleru explains she was swallowed by one, while the man says he found a troll corpse underground, its arms and legs torn off, and its guts everywhere. From that, he deduces that Clen is the one who killed his own monster. Now understanding the situation, Clevites tells Nelleru to take Luna to the village entrance and wait there. Alicia asks if she should go too, but Clevites tells her to stay. This man is a black beast who's taken human form. In truth, he's a creature with claws and wings, and only one being is capable of using illusions this powerful: the king of Western black beasts, Zavthir of the Phantoms. Curiously, according to Clen, this beast doesn't get along with Clevites of the Moonlight. The man asks how Clen knows all this and who he really is. Concealing his true identity, Clen gives his name and claims to serve a king of black beasts in human form, just like the guy in front of him. Realizing the boy must be a servant of Clevites, the man decides to reveal his true form to show they're on the same side. He's heard that Clevites destroyed a humanoid capital, and that Lady Zavthir is also considering the destruction of humanoids. The monster claims to be Gart, servant of Zavthir, and demands that Clen prove he really is a black beast. In response, Clen reveals his tale, quickly convincing his opponent. From that point on, Gart returns to his human form and decides there's no reason to keep fighting these people. Alicia is shocked to realize there are other kings like Clevites in the beast's underworld, which means the heroes who died by her side weren't even fighting the right battle. Even though she says nothing, Clen tells her to drop those unnecessary suspicions, explaining that very few beasts are able to take human form and speak, and aside from Zavthir, who has a fondness for illusions, none of them would involve themselves with humanoids without a good reason, since all black beasts despise these beings. That, by the way, is why Gart demands a retraction about Alicia being a hero and about Clevites' servant being with her, since heroes are the sworn enemies of the beasts. Clen confirms that Alicia is a hero, but now she serves him, bound by a spell that prevents her from disobeying his orders. While he tries to learn the ways of the humanoids, she acts as both guide and shield for him. The same goes for the other girl and the baby. They're all tools for Clevites to better understand humanoids. Having said that, since Gart is an outsider, Clen refuses to reveal anything else, and the beast from the west understands, but makes it clear he'll kill Clen's tools if they get in his way. Clen, in turn, tells him to go ahead and try his luck. He then asks why Zavthir wants to wipe out the humanoids, since the Zavthir he knows is odd and enjoys observing these races, not to mention being adored by the orgs in the western forests. Hearing this, Alicia discovers the real reason why heroes never venture west. You simply can't cross the forest without the orgs' cooperation. This makes the knight wonder what happened on that side of the continent, while Gart tells them that 3 days ago, in the great western forests, he was flying through the sky when he landed on a branch to watch a pair of monsters who had probably just lost their offspring. In that area, there was a shiny object lying on the ground, so Gart brought it to his mistress and told her this was yet another time a black beast cub had disappeared for no reason, and it's possible others vanished without their knowledge. Gart couldn't explain why, but he believed humanoids were behind it. Zavthir was surprised by the bird's claim, since he had supposedly built a good relationship with the orcs. Either way, she saw it as a bad omen. Gart asked if he should summon the orc chief, but the king said no, as they weren't to be trusted. In fact, his servant had been sent to the world of the humanoids to investigate what was really going on, and if necessary, he should consider destroying them all. On top of that, Gart now says that cubs have also likely disappeared in the southern mountains, and he came here searching for clues. Clem reveals he killed the little man and his troll, but Gart understands it was self-defense. In Clem's view, the cubs being taken might not be limited to black beasts. Karm had told him that women there shouldn't give birth, because some strange men dressed in black always come and buy the babies, saying something about talent. According to her, these men were so terrifying that even Vroko was afraid of them. Connecting the dots, Clem admitted that he'd always found it odd that Nell had 3 stillborn children. So he asked Karm if she had killed them. The woman confessed that she had, because that was the rule among the women there. The minors' men don't protect them, and their children are left at the mercy of those baby buyers. To protect what little pride they had left, they did everything possible to avoid getting pregnant. But since Nell was too foolish to keep her word, Karm had to end the babies' lives herself. The pain of remembering this made her scream violently. Her volume and aggression made Luna cry, and Clem assured her that he understood what Karm meant, but pointed out that Nell was born there, and her mother probably hid her until she was old enough not to be sold, something Karm and the other women had never tried to do. After telling this story, Clem says he sees a link between those baby buyers and the cubs being kidnapped by humanoids. He notes that the buyers were connected to Vroko, who himself owned a troll. Besides that, the talent the buyers mentioned might refer to the magic these children possessed. Clevitis asks Alicia what she thinks is going on, but she repeats that she knows nothing about magic and can't really say, though she believes these men in black seem capable of such evil after all. They're mages willing to use any sorcery as a tool of war. Alicia remembers that these mages appeared in recent years on the Dun Plain, fueling a deadly conflict between Bolate and Eslin. Whenever these mages entered the field, their abilities decided who would win. The first to bring them into battle was, at the time, the expedition commander to Haydn of Bolate's army, General Drell, known as the Dragonslayer, who marched all the way to the frontier fortress of Highgate. According to Alicia, this was the man who killed her father. After delivering the blow that would take his life, the officer said, "The sword alone cannot overcome every wall. Soon, the age of sword and magic will begin." Clem asks why she came to kill him instead of the man who really killed her father. She explains it was her father's last wish. Back during the invasion of Highgate, there was an Eslin camp 6 miles east of the fortress. Rod Royce, commander of the 1st Division of the Royal Guard, ordered his forces to gather west of Highgate. At that moment, an ally named Miquel arrived on horseback to warn them that their detachment had been wiped out, and Bolate's army, led by Drell, was still heading south with 50,000 men. Realizing they would try to take Haydn, Rod lamented that his battalion numbered only 6,000 men, and they didn't have enough mages. The main army's reinforcements wouldn't arrive for another 3 days. Drawing on the ground, the commander sketched out for his companion how Drell's army was closing in on Highgate, a fortress with a large gate to the east and a smaller one to the west. If the defending force could get inside through the western gate, on Eslin's side, they'd be able to seal it off and put up a fight, even with their overwhelming disadvantage in numbers. But for that to happen, they'd need Haydn's cooperation. Rod had sent messengers, but received no reply, and things inside the fortress were likely in chaos. Miquel asked if the rumors were true. Had Clevitis really attacked the castle? The commander suspected it was true. That might explain why Bolate had sent his most powerful general. After all, the royal forge was now exposed. Without that forge, Rod's regalia, the Frostflower, and the black weapons used by Miquel and the other captains couldn't have been made. But that wasn't all. The royal family's forge in Haydn was the oldest magical artifact in the world, and anyone who studied magic would want its secrets more than anything. On that note, Miquel pointed out that Bolate's forces were already stronger than theirs. If they managed to seize the forge, it wouldn't just be Eslin at risk, but all of Edthea. At that moment, a scout arrived with a warning for Commander Royce. The western gate of Highgate was closed, but the eastern, larger gate was opening. Out from the fortress stepped a young Bolate fighter named Maynard Swan, leaving behind an endless trail of death. With his appearance, he confirmed King Haydn's demise and announced that the crown princess was safe somewhere else. The problem, however, was the 6-month-old son, the only one known for certain to have royal blood, who'd been taken by a black-haired boy and vanished. No one knew if the baby was still alive, but Maynard had just received word from the Ravens. They'd found a Haydn child with a black-haired boy. As the most powerful mage in the army, Swan was sent to investigate. Meanwhile, General Drell ordered his subordinate to have the baby in hand by the time he arrived at Hydra. almost at their destination. Clevites takes advantage of a quick break to ask what this boiling black water is that he's drinking. Nelleru patiently explains that it's coffee, a pretty expensive drink, actually, that Chief Vroko would treat himself to from time to time. She says these coffee beans were picked in Sarada, all the way across the Eastern Sea. She even added sugar to help the boy with his fatigue. Clem points out how humans always come up with these odd ideas, and when he burns his tongue by forgetting he's just a vulnerable boy now. He quickly stops Luna from grabbing the hot mug and sharing his fate. Nelleru asks where that scary man went, and Clan explains that Gart went off to report something about magic to someone he's not exactly sure who. Either way, Clan assures her that he's cleared Gart's suspicions about Nelleru, so she doesn't need to be afraid of him anymore. Right in the middle of all this, Alicia Glenfall comes in to announce that she spoke to some local merchants and found out things in Hyden have taken a turn for the worse. Bolate, the neighboring nation, has crossed the border. Hyden put up a good fight, but after the king was gone and the capital froze, they couldn't hold off the invasion. Alicia heard that Eslan tried to block them at the border, but failed. Clan wonders why that nation, of all places, would do something like this. So the hero explains that Eslan and Bolate have been at war since ancient times. As for Eslan, they're way behind when it comes to magic, and there's no way they'll stand by while Hyden's royal forge falls into enemy hand, especially now that the king is dead and no one else knows how to operate that relic. After all, they never had any wizards because the king forbade the use of sorcery within his borders, and that's probably one of the reasons why Clevites doesn't know a thing about magic. Nelleru cuts the explanation short to serve coffee to the warrior, who's genuinely surprised to get a mug. Clen teases that she's probably never had the stuff either, and Alicia admits she grew up in a remote village where treats like this were just too expensive. Instantly falling for the taste, she confides to Nelleru that she always thought coffee would be bitter, and the girl cheerfully shares that she made it extra sweet. When the nursemaid takes Luna away to feed him, Alicia praises the girl's character. Just looking at her, she says, lifts her spirits. Hearing this, Clen, thinking Alicia's flirting, flat out declares that there's no way Alicia could have a kid with Nelleru. Alicia promptly spits out her coffee and insists she didn't do something heroic for the first time in her life just to be branded like that. But getting back on topic, she's losing patience with the beast's logic and wants to know what they're planning to do, since Clevites wants Luna to become king. But at this rate, it's only a matter of time before the whole kingdom is wiped out because someone wrecked the capital. As if none of this has anything to do with him, the king of Black Beasts shrugs and says it doesn't matter to him if Hyden ends up as part of Bolate. But Glenfall has to warn him Luna is from Hyden. If Bolate calls the shots, that kid's never wearing a crown, and it gets worse. Luna will be captured, or worse still, because pure-blooded Hyden babies are rare. If Hyden vanishes, the boy loses his place in the world of men. According to the hero, the royal line guards the secrets of refined magical ore. Bolate wants that, and only Drell, the Dragon Slayer, has the power to lead an army to seize it. When Alicia's father retired and went into hiding, Drell made a point of tracking him down and killing him. Afterwards, the general said the two were friends, and now that he'd finished off his old companion, Drell had reached the peak of his strength. Furious, Alicia was ready to go after the killer, but her father stopped her before he died. He said that if she attacked that man, she'd be dragged into war, and war is the farthest thing from a hero's path. It only shrinks the world of men. If Alicia ever wanted to be a hero, she should never fight that Bolate officer. Only then, he said, would she see what lies beyond this world's boundaries, and he'd be able to see it with her. Those were his last words before he finally passed away, leaving young Alicia Glenfall to cry out in utter despair. Back to the present, that same woman now tells Clen that if he wants Luna to survive in the world of men, he'll have to drive out Bolate's forces and protect Hyden. The boy finds it ironic having to save the very thing he once swore to destroy, but that's just how it is now. Alicia says she'll go with the beast, but Clevites orders her to stay and protect the child and his nursemaid. He doesn't want anyone knowing that Clevites, king of black beasts, is working to protect a human that would be showing a weakness. What he needs is a reason to get involved. Take the wizards and Drell, for example. If they're secretly kidnapping beast cubs, it's only natural for a leader of their kind to investigate. It's a good chance for Clen to see what those wizards are capable of. He knows the human girl wants revenge for her father, but now isn't the time. Besides, Alicia was told not to fight Drell. On that note, the living dead admits it was a promise to her father. He always said war is the opposite of the hero's path. But she's no hero anymore, just a walking corpse fueled by a beast's blood. Clevites asks if it's really up to a human to decide whether she's a hero or not. If wielding a sword makes her a hero, or killing a black beast earns her the title, then so be it. But to start with, he wonders why she chose that path in the first place. Alicia answers she wanted to make the world a bigger place. If that's the case, Clen assures her, Nelleru's world is a lot bigger now. And for the record, the King of Beasts says he never told Alicia to stop being a hero. But if that's what she wants, he won't stand in her way. Disturbed by what she's just heard, Alicia notices Clem calmly entering the forest and warns him not to let his guard down. He turns around, channeling his power around his horn, and then asks, "Who do you think I am?" With those words, a burst of light explodes outward, followed by a gust of wind that nearly sweeps Luna away. As Alicia draws near, Nelleru asks where their master went, and Alicia tells her he'll be back soon whether he wants to or not. Speaking of him, Clevitus charges through the forest at breakneck speed. Having taken on his true beast form, racing up the slope of a hill, he lets out a howl, echoing toward his home, the Moon Mountain. Meanwhile, in Serit, Haydn's second fortress, the wall is brought down, clearing the way for the Bolade army's invasion, led by the notorious Dragon Slayer, whose left eye radiates a menacing power. Watching the fortress fall from a distance, Mikkel asks what they're supposed to do now, considering the two of them crossed the border without permission. Bolate's forces will reach Hydrat quickly, and reinforcements won't arrive in time. Galloping at full speed, Rod Royce replies that they need to stop the enemy now. Just ahead lies a broad, shallow lake, the perfect place for a showdown. At the same time, a Hydnaean scout patrolling the war front also spots Bolate's advance and turns back on horseback. Arriving in the city of Shirn, Alicia spots a survivor from the Ravens being beaten by a mob and accused of being a criminal. The attackers claim that Shirn belongs to the Carpenters, while the beaten man insists he was only trying to escape. Nelleru trembles with fear at the sight of a Raven in town, but Alicia promises that nobody will recognize her in this new disguise. On the other hand, the Raven recognizes Alicia and yells that she's the heroine who unleashed the octopus in Else Mind's well, by the time anyone looks, though Alicia has already turned the corner, so the mob misses her entirely. To make matters worse, the townsfolk grumble that the country wouldn't be in such a state if the heroes were still alive. And with that, the mob decides to hang the Raven from a tree. In the next scene, they do exactly as they threatened, making him the 9th victim that day. One resident wonders if the story about the Else octopus might actually be true, and soon everyone is asking what on earth is happening to their country. The sudden appearance of this ancient species would already be a disaster, never mind the attack by Clevites or the advance of Bolate's army. To the people, it feels like the end of the world, but if that's the case, they swear they'll protect the city themselves. From the youngest to the oldest, anyone able to wield a weapon should arm themselves and stand with the rest. Amid all this tension, with peasants and carpenters rushing everywhere, Alicia begs Nelleru not to call her a heroine under any circumstances. She has to hide who she is. Soon, the two enter a tavern and are met with suspicious stares from a pair of Hydnaeans who ask if they're with the Ravens. Alicia stammers as she tries to explain they're not, until an old woman scolds her sons for making so much noise and waking the baby. One of the big guys says the stranger came in with an eye patch and a sword, but the tavern owner argues there's no way to walk around unarmed these days. She also grumbles that Phil and Pete are so timid they're just like their father, despite their size. Eventually, the owner introduces herself as Kari. Immediately noticing that Luna must be a pureblood Hydnaean, she can tell from the baby's pale pink hair and pointed ears. She wants to know what brings these outsiders here, and depending on their answer, she might just set her two blockheads on them. Glenfall explains that they're guards in service of an important person, and right now, their job is to protect the child. Kari buys the story, even if her sons are still suspicious, guessing the women work for some noble who fled Hydrat or something along those lines. In the end, though, it doesn't matter what their purpose is. The tavern owner just wants to know if these young ladies are going to spend any money. Speaking of which, Alicia asks for a room where the baby can sleep, plus food for her and Nelleru. The owner charges 2 silver coins a night, payment up front. Once she gets the money, Kari shows them to their room. Though her sons clearly haven't dropped their guard, the mother has to scold them to behave themselves. No wonder they can't find girlfriends. Hoping to fix that, Pete offers to help Nelleru with her luggage, but the bag is so heavy he needs Phil's help to get it up the stairs. Inside the room, Kari asks what they think of the place, and Alicia compliments the iron beds. Kari admits it's odd to find iron beds in a city of carpenters. Years ago, she explains, the locals built some chairs for the castle, and as thanks, the king gave them the beds. Remembering this, the innkeeper sighs before leaving, lamenting that the king died and this war began. Meanwhile, a flying insect lands on the window. Through it, Maynard Swan celebrates finally finding his targets, then unleashes a massive swarm to hunt down Haydn's missing prince. As night falls, Alicia notices from her window that she can see Moon Mountain in the distance, a sight that makes her wonder if Clevites has already reached the battlefield. Nelleru interrupts her thoughts, showing Alicia that Luna has just gotten her first tooth. Both of them marvel at how adorable the baby is. Kari soon arrives to announce that dinner is ready, so Alicia heads downstairs to fetch the meal and bring it back to their room. Downstairs, Gabby, a regular at the tavern, asks Kari who the woman beside her is. But Kari shuts him down, making it clear the woman isn't interested, especially since she's got a baby. As Alicia makes her way to the counter, she overhears the customers gossiping about how the king of Hyden once tried to kill one of the kings of the Black Beasts, but failed thanks to the incompetence of the crown's heroes. According to what they've heard, these heroes only care about their titles so they can claim the king's regalia. In fact, one of them apparently got a weapon in the morning and sold it by that same afternoon. Gabby points out that there's no point in forging these magic swords if no one's willing to challenge the kings of the Dark Beasts. And that's exactly why the king stopped making weapons 15 years ago. Then, out of nowhere, he picked 13 heroes and even held a parade in front of the castle, where these knights swore to defeat one of the beasts as their leader. As the men talked, Alicia kept hearing the same thing from everyone. The heroes were useless, arrogant, and spoiled, and that the king's downfall was all their fault, which led to this new war against Bolate. In the end, only people who don't have to work hard every day have time to dream about what lies beyond the continent of Ethia. Suddenly, a giant red orb comes crashing violently through the window. Alicia tries to warn them, but Pete touches the thing, and then a black beast in the shape of a centipede reveals its entire length and flings the Hydnian against the wall with no effort at all. One of the Hydnians yells that it's an insect, but Maynard steps in to clarify. This isn't just any bug, it's a species native to the land of the Dark Beasts. In other words, it's basically a beast. He also warns everyone to stay still, or this creature will attack. Even without being commanded, Alicia reaches for her sword, only to realize she left it in her room. Gabby jumps out the window, but is immediately snatched and devoured by a swarm of flying insects outside the tavern. With a sly smile, Maynard remarks that he forgot to mention he'd scattered plenty of other insects all over the city, just to make sure not a single rat escapes. Kari demands to know who he is and what he wants, so the man politely apologizes for his lack of manners and formally introduces himself. Maynard Swan, Supreme Mage of General Drell's army. His mission: to find out whether the baby hidden in this tavern is of royal blood. Meanwhile, Alicia hears a noise upstairs. Nelaru is being held captive by a girl who's levitating the iron beds. The girl introduces herself as Nay Chiffinlets, a high mage from Bolate. Clevites was already sprinting toward the city, while tension built inside the tavern. Nelaru asked how the girl had managed to get up to the second floor, and she calmly replied that she'd used that axe to fly. Her power allowed her to control magnetism to attract or repel anything made of iron, so if she gripped the wooden handle and let the axe repel it, she could literally take off into the air. With that explained, the mage stepped closer to the child and said that, from what she'd heard, this magic came from an eastern turtle with an iron shell. If you struck the turtle with a steel sword, the blade would stick to it. Even with a stone spear, the iron shell would push it away. People said it was difficult to deal with such a creature. It wasn't exactly a friendly monster, but everyone made the most of whatever magic they had. The mage then took out a vial of medicine and said she'd give it to the baby to reveal his talent. If the child had magical ability, his eyes would change color. If he didn't, he'd start coughing blood until he died, which meant if the baby survived, he most likely had royal blood. Nelaru panicked, screaming at the top of her lungs, and that's when Alicia heard the cries and rushed to the room where they were. Maynard moved to stop her, sending his insect to intercept. Nelaru struggled with everything she had, but Nay warned her. Her power could stop even a raging bull. With 2 iron beds pinning her down, Nelaru would have to be stronger than 2 bulls to break free, and those skinny arms didn't look up to the task. But with the strength only a mother can summon, she shattered the iron frames and broke loose. Hearing the crash, Maynard's concern grew, even as his insect lunged at the heroine. But Alicia showed exactly why she bore her title. One powerful kick was all it took to send the beast flying. In that moment, Maynard realized exactly who this warrior was. Alicia reached the room where Nelaru was. Nay was unconscious, and Luna was safe. According to the wet nurse, she'd shoved the iron beds with such force that she'd knocked down entire walls and the Bolate mage along with them. Alicia was genuinely impressed by such strength. But now wasn't the time to dwell on it. They needed to get out of there fast. These people were after Luna, and their belongings could be replaced. All Alicia needed was her sword. Speaking of which, the flying insects were already swarming toward the collapsed wall. But Alicia showed no sign of fear. The moment she had her gear back, she slung Nelaru over her shoulders, activated her dragonfly multi-attack, and dropped safely to the ground, cutting down several insects on the way. Nay tried to use her magic to keep the enemies from escaping, but the flying insects ahead of her were getting struck by the levitated objects she hurled, making her efforts pointless. And with that many bugs in front of her, she couldn't give chase either. She'd need Maynard to call them off. As for the insects themselves, they weren't chasing the 2 women. They'd been ordered to surround only the inn. With some luck, Alicia and Nelaru could make it straight out of the city. But when they reached the forest, heading toward their destination. A wall of flying insects blocked their way. Alicia knew she couldn't use the dragonfly technique too many times. She'd tire long before killing them all. For now, hiding was the safest choice somewhere the insects couldn't get in, keeping Luna out of harm's way. Back at the tavern, Nay told Maynard the women had escaped. He asked if she'd tested the baby for magic, but she admitted she hadn't. A woman with inhuman strength had been in the room with the child and stopped her. The mage realized he'd underestimated his enemies. What's more, he now recognized the one-eyed woman. Hero Alicia Glenfall, one of the 13 heroes. Maynard had been there when General Drell fought her father, and that only confirmed the child's royal blood after all. A hero wouldn't be traveling with just any baby. There was no need for a test. Maynard didn't know what those women were doing here, but he decided it would be worth torturing them to find out. Then he announced it was time to gather the entire town in the main square. When they arrived, the leader of the townsfolk demanded to know the reason for this sudden meeting. He even pointed out that Bolate was outnumbered. While all the civilians were armed, he clearly wasn't afraid of the enemy kingdom's envoys, insects or not. If they wanted a fight, the townsfolk were ready. But first, he wanted to know exactly what Maynard and Nay intended to do with this country. Maynard replied that the people of Shirn had a wonderful kind of audacity. First of all, they needed to understand that if their king hadn't died in a senseless wager, Bolate wouldn't be here at all. To the civilians, the mages might look like an invading army, but that wasn't true. They'd come to protect Shirn's people and land, because the king of the Black Beasts had attacked this country's capital. If he returned, the beasts would claim the entire land and Haydn wouldn't be able to stop it. That was why the mages had come, to do whatever it took to protect the human world. So the civilians asked, if that was true, why bring all these insects, especially when those protectors had killed one of their own? Maynard didn't dodge the question. He admitted his insects had killed a civilian, but brushed it off as an unfortunate accident. His ironic tone only enraged the townsfolk further. Then he added that he was after a criminal who had betrayed Haydn and was now an enemy of all humanity. As for the insects, Maynard explained, they were the only way to capture that woman who was also the enemy of every single person standing there. After all, she was one of the 13 heroes responsible for all this, and her name was Alicia Glenfall. Meanwhile, on the Merrill River in Haydn, 100,000 meters from the capital, Hydrat, General Drell rode at the head of his soldiers, pressing onward toward his objective until he suddenly raised his hand and ordered the column to halt. He had sensed someone hiding nearby. Without warning, Rod Royce emerged from the shadows, unleashing his regalia, Frost Blossom. The ground around them froze solid in an instant, locking Drell's army in place. With the enemy immobilized, the warriors of Eslan charged in, wearing spiked boots to keep their footing on the ice. It was Rhodes' strategy, 6,000 against 50,000, and the key was simple. Take down the enemy mages first and ensure that anyone who fell never stood back up. Facing his primary opponent, Drell actually praised the descendant of the hero Royce. According to him, Frost Blossom had once been used to annihilate a horde of black beasts at the gates of an Eslan city, and the young man had mastered that same power. However, Drell pointed out, no ice magic alone could possibly freeze the entire river at once. He suspected that Rhodes had stationed multiple mages upriver to chill the water until it hovered just above the freezing point. Rod admitted the guess was spot on, but as long as he could keep his targets pinned here, victory was inevitable. He struck at Drell with his weapon, but the general's reflexes were razor sharp. He deflected the blow with his sword. To dismount his foe, Rod summoned Ice Vine, a massive serpent of frost that lunged toward Drell, freezing his horse solid and forcing the man to fight on foot. Drell acknowledged his opponent's skill, the strength of his regalia, and the sheer power Rod possessed to bring out its full potential. But, he added, none of that would be enough to achieve what Rod was trying to do, not to break the shackles of the world. With those words, the Bolat officer swung his blade and conjured the claws of the Death Dragon. They struck Rod with such crushing force that he was hurled back without even a chance to resist. Seeing this, Mikkel called in the first company to support their commander. Drell explained that by fusing his sword with magic, he had elevated his Black Dragon regalia into something far beyond an ordinary weapon. In his hands, it became a relic capable of unleashing devastating power with a mere sweep of a blade, scattering enemy soldiers like insects and even striking down his own men without hesitation. The general of Bolat couldn't care less. Anyone too weak to survive here had no right to advance beyond this world. Rhodes demanded to know what he meant by this world and reminded him he'd also spoken of these supposed shackles of the world. What exactly was the general trying to accomplish? Drell's answer was blunt. He sought to destroy the legend of the heroes. It was a tradition impossible to uphold. Yet because of it, humans repeatedly challenged an unbeatable opponent, one who wielded invincible methods and died for it, like his great-grandfather and his old friend before him. Every champion of humanity believed in the legend and was crushed by Bolat, generation after generation. For thousands, no, tens of thousands of years, the story had never changed. That was why the cycle of tragedy had to end. In recognition of the great fight the young Eslan commander had put up, Drell declared he would not deliver the final blow. Instead, he would simply march on with his forces, leaving the boy behind to watch the world change from afar. But the course of the war shifted the moment Clevites stepped onto the battlefield. The looming, shadowed presence of the king of the black beasts froze every combatant in place. No human dared move in the face of such an overwhelming figure. Assuming the man before him was General Drell, Clevites let out a bone-chilling howl, his voice carrying a crushing weight that made it clear he was the king of the southern black beasts for good reason. Drell drew his sword. He respected the creature before him, but he wasn't about to back down. First, he wanted to know what the beast desired. Clevites' initial question was simple. Where had this magic of Drell's come from? Young humans and black beast cubs had been vanishing, and he'd been told it was connected to the magic Drell wielded. The general asked if such a trivial matter was really worth a beast king's concern. Clevites replied that a sovereign must answer for everything within his domain, just as with the king of this very nation. Any who entered his territory had to die by his claws. That was the law of the world and of fate itself. Drell laughed, asking what fate was and who had created it. In response, the Black Beast King swept his tails through the air, unleashing a gale that hurled the nearby humans skyward. Drell moved to counter, but one of the creature's claws speared through him as if he were nothing. With his foe pinned, Clevites warned him not to answer a question with another question. Even then, Drell smiled, admitting that he had predicted this outcome, that the beast would strike him. According to the general, Clevites had known that after the fall of Hydan's castle, he would appear here. Now, it was time for the Beast King to face the consequences. He unleashed his most powerful spell, the Prison of Cursed Blood. The Bolat warrior erupted in a spray of crimson, sealing the Beast King inside a sphere of blood. In that moment, Drell's sword opened its eye, releasing a magic that forced the man to abandon his body. "I am a sword," he declared, "and this sword is my life." The general had sacrificed his own blood and flesh to conjure this crushing tide of magical blood, one so powerful that not even a king of the black beasts could break free from it. The creature was doomed to stay and wither away, slowly, inevitably. Rhodes could hardly believe it. The king of the black beasts had truly been brought down. Meanwhile, Drell gave the order for his troops to advance. Far away, Alicia and Nelaru were sprinting through the dense forest. Behind them, torches flared in the darkness, casting jagged light on the enraged civilians of Shirn as they pushed forward, their faces twisted with hatred for the so-called heroine. Without delay, while the city remains overrun with swarms of flying insects, the peasants make their way to a small wooden house where the women are hiding. Since they've played around this area since childhood, they warn that there's no way the women can conceal themselves from them, and demand that they come out at once. According to the villagers, the so-called hero isn't anything special just because she knows how to swing a sword. In truth, common folk like them have always despised heroes after all. They kill a few magical beasts now and then and are worshipped as idols for life, while ordinary workers toil endlessly without ever receiving recognition. On top of that, the taxes they pay all go toward those flashy weapons and polished armor worn by warriors. Heroes aren't the ones planting trees, cutting their trunks, and turning them into the houses and furniture that allow a town to exist. Inside, Nelaru tells Alicia that she's special for saving her life, but the warrior is more concerned with keeping her friend away from the window to avoid any nasty surprises. With Nelaru and Luna pulled back, Alicia admits to herself that they can't hide here, not from the villagers, nor from the enemy sorcerer with his endless swarm of insects. To be honest, she doesn't really know what to do. Meanwhile, Phil, the most hot-headed of the lot, threatens to throw a flaming torch into the wooden house. At the last moment, Pete stops him, and just then their father appears alongside Kari to reprimand his youngest son. The father reminds him that their ancestors built this water wheel more than 2 centuries ago, and since the house is connected to it, it will not be burned under any circumstance. Phil argues they must hand the outsiders over to the sorcerer, but his father strikes him and retorts that they don't have to take orders from anyone who came from outside. This is their problem, their country's problem, and their town's problem. In fact, some villagers had already left the Bolate sorcerers waiting, keeping an eye on them so they wouldn't cause trouble. Taking charge of the situation, the man steps forward and introduces himself to the women as Mark, commander of the town guard. He then asks the hero to come out and answer a few questions. Until their conversation is over, the commander promises no one will lay a hand on them or the baby. Inside, Nelaru begs Alicia not to go. but the human decides to step out and face them. When asked, she admits that she is a hero, but that she lost her treasure when she fought Clevites and was defeated. In that battle, all her comrades were annihilated. Alicia understands why the people of Shirn would hate her because of that outcome, and so she asks their forgiveness. Ignoring the apology, Mark assures her that in this case, it's fine. If she had come here just to sell the treasure, he would have killed her himself. But if Alicia fought and lost, then so be it. After all, it was their king who sent the women on this mission, and such is the city's tradition. Phil protests, asking if his father will really just let it go like that, while Alicia nervously wonders if the people here truly don't hate her anymore. Mark explains that the real question is what comes next, whether it's worth keeping the tradition alive and paying the price for it. When the next king is chosen, should ordinary citizens still support that new ruler? For the past 1,000 years, people like Alicia Glenfall have faced the kings of the dark beasts and sought to discover what lies beyond the horizon. But what the commander wants to know is whether this 1,000-year struggle has amounted to anything and whether she really saw something beyond the world they know. At those words, Alicia is overwhelmed by heavy memories of that hopeless battle. She recalls that when she attacked Clevites, she was thrown high into the air, and for a brief instant, she managed to see beyond those domains. It was a boundless, circular expanse stretching endlessly. Because of that moment, to her, it was all worth it. Even after failing, she feels she shouldn't say this, but the truth is that the world is far bigger than they believe, and they know nothing at all. Without the courage to try, society loses the chance to know so many things and so many people. Ironically, Alicia learned this not long ago from someone arrogant and terrifying, someone who treats her like garbage. And yet, if she hadn't met that person, her world surely would have remained small. That's why she insists it is worth pushing beyond the limits, worth venturing into the unknown to uncover the hidden corners of the world. Above all, for the memory of the heroes who died for that dream. Glenfall will not allow anyone here to say it wasn't worth it. Hearing this, the villagers look stunned. Mark lets out a laugh and admits that the king's only wise decision was choosing the heroes. With that, he releases Alicia and her companions, granting them safe passage. From now on, the wall of insects in the forest will be her responsibility, while the townsfolk will take care of the rest. But as soon as the commander finishes speaking, Maynard bursts onto the scene riding a massive insect and tears through Mark's chest. Alicia steps forward, hand on her sword, demanding to know why the sorcerer did this. He sneers, explaining that the fool had ruined his entertainment. He wanted to watch the little hero of Haydn torn apart by her own people. Furious at his mockery, Alicia unleashes her rising dragon technique, slashing the sorcerer's insect mount to ribbons. When thousands of flying insects descend upon them, the hero orders all her allies back inside the cabin for safety. Outside, Glenfall continues the fight, cutting down enemy after enemy, though fatigue soon begins to show. Maynard claps at her efforts, admitting she must not be underestimated. After all, she sacrificed herself for her companions and now fights alone against an endless swarm of giant insects. To make matters worse, her breathing grows labored and her strength falters, and that's when Maynard explains the insects are venomous. If she focuses too much on the bigger ones, the poison from the smaller ones will take her down. After all, Maynard's army doesn't live on giants alone. As the bees swarmed above the skies, ants at their true size climbed up the heroine's legs to do their work, while spiders with venom strong enough to dissolve blood struck from the shadows. Before Alicia could kill the one clinging to her neck, it bit her. Maynard explained that its venom was so potent, it melted smaller creatures from the inside. Setting that aside, the sorcerer admitted he had never liked heroes. Once, he admired them, but when he needed them most, he lost everything he had, and no hero ever came to his aid. Only an elderly couple of neighbors helped him, far more useful than those so-called warriors who parade around as idols of the nation. In Maynard of Bolate's mind, true strength lay in rejecting the heroism of such frauds, just as he and General Drell had done. With that, Maynard unleashed swarms of flying insects against his foe. Alicia staggered, her vision blurring from the poison, and as she scraped together her last strength to push back the monsters, she wondered if her magic-infused blood would be enough to survive such a deadly dose coursing through her veins. In the midst of the struggle, Clevites suddenly appeared from within the servant's garments, snapping at her to end this nonsense quickly and return to her duty. Hiding away the dark beast, Alicia pressed on with the fight, while smaller insects began invading the cabin where villagers had taken shelter with Nelaru and Luna. Kari ordered every crack sealed and each bug that slipped inside killed on sight. For the baby had to be protected. The child was the nation's future. They had to believe the hero would handle the swarms outside. while the people defended Luna within. Using their tools as makeshift weapons, the villagers did whatever they could to keep more insects from breaking in. Meanwhile, Maynard mocked Glenfall's efforts, declaring that heroes like her were nothing but pathetic frauds, especially her, thinking her pitiful strength could overcome an army of insects. To raise the stakes even further, the sorcerer of Bolate conjured a colossal scorpion that burst from the earth and lashed at the undead warrior with its tail, forcing her to leap back and tumble into a river. Seeing her slowed movements, Clevites concluded she had been poisoned even with her magic blood. It wasn't enough to affect him, but the heroine would only recover once the venom ran its course. In short, Alicia questioned whether she was truly immortal in that moment, and the black beast confirmed it. When Alicia failed to climb out of the river, Maynard shifted his focus to the cabin. On the roof, larvae gnawed through the wood, and one had already broken inside, around the house. The creatures weren't just devouring the dwelling, they were consuming the entire forest. Back in Cheyenne, the townsfolk overpowered Bolate's soldiers and captured Nay. From the sound of the battle, they guessed Maynard had gone to the watermill. The sorceress remarked that things had finally begun. The villagers asked what she meant, and one questioned why she hadn't left with that man. Calmly, Nay called him a fool, explaining she hadn't gone because she didn't want to die. If Maynard decided to take this fight seriously, everything around him would be nothing but feed for his insects. According to her, Maynard Swan was the most powerful sorcerer in Bolate, the true master of insects. At the watermill, the mage urged the heroine to savor the sound of the forest being devoured, as if the trees themselves were screaming. The larvae responsible belonged to the Giganissant, a colossal moth that laid its eggs once a century so its brood could consume everything in their path. These larvae lived only on a single eastern island which, once every 100 years, was stripped of its trees and left barren. But the larvae were cunning, they spared the seeds, letting them grow back into a vast forest until the cycle began again. Maynard's power was to accelerate this cycle, calling the creatures ahead of time. Starving as they were, they would reduce the cabin to dust within minutes. Not just that the forest would vanish, destroying the lumber trade Cheyenne relied upon to survive. Listening with a sinking heart, Alicia Glenfall burst from beneath the water in a dazzling leap, scattering the winged insects that circled above. Looking toward the forest, she spotted cocoons strung along the trunks. In moments, they split open, unleashing swarms of moths that lunged at her. Maynard grew more delighted, treating the battle as entertainment, while his opponent grew ever more strained, weakened by both disadvantage and venom. To make matters worse, the scales from the moth's wings released a powder that clouded her vision. Struck by the colossal scorpion, she was then pierced from behind by its venomous tail. Without pause, countless smaller insects swarmed over her until her body was nearly smothered. From within the cabin, Nelleru cried out her name, but Alicia could not respond, and in seconds she was buried beneath an endless tide of monsters. Seeing this, Clevites decided to step in. From beneath the swarm, the treasure sword erupted in a flash, its crimson glow instantly recognized by Maynard the Regalia. As the insects scattered from the light, the Beast King explained to his servant that every living being in this world was made mostly of water, even insects. In other words, an insect horde could be seen as a river, and that sword had the power to bring it to an end. With that, Alicia Glenfall seizes her weapon and drives away every insect around her. Then, she calls upon the flow dividing regalia current slicing water cut. As she spins her sword infused with that power, the heroine devastates a wide area in all directions, so much so that even Maynard is caught in the onslaught. When a massive wave of smoke rises across the horizon, swallowing the entire territory, Nay can hardly believe what her eyes are seeing. Every single insect is fleeing in blind desperation from that colossal curtain. Those unable to escape are torn apart, unleashing a rain of insect blood that drenches the land. From that moment on, Phil truly understands what it means to be a hero, and that Glenfall embodies it completely. Thrown to the ground, watching his swarms shredded to pieces all around him, Maynard can only think that none of this should be possible. In that instant, the magic stone embedded in his chest shatters. And yet, even with Alicia standing over him, blade aimed at his heart, the mage vows he will never surrender. So, the heroine simply smashes him across the head, knocking him out cold. To her, whatever he had to say could wait. She had no time for his words. Just then, as Nelleru arrives carrying Luna in her arms, Alicia nearly collapses. Before her body can hit the ground, Clen reappears, catching her mid-fall. Frankly, he finds it pathetic that the servant struggled so much against such a pitiful lackey. But brushing that aside, he explains that he came to summon the servants to withdraw. The situation has changed. Almost drained of strength, Alicia manages to ask if Clevites has defeated General Drell. Clen tells her that the officer is still alive, aided by another king of the Black Beasts, and continues to march with his army intact. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.